So welcome everybody to this Crossroads of Caring Lunch and Learn. Our topic today is about pediatric chaplaincy, and our presenter is Patti Blaine. She's a staff chaplain at URMC at Golisano Children's Hospital here in Rochester, New York. And I'm Mary Ann Brody. I'm the executive director of Crossroads of Caring and also a certified ACPE educator with our program. And we're very glad to have Patti, who's also a member of our professional advisory committee, be able to present to us today. So Patti, I am going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm coming to you from my office at work, where I have to turn off the air conditioner if I want to hear things. So if I start sweating, that's why. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, look, it remembered. So I'm very glad to be with you today. Thank you for joining this Lunch and Learn about pediatric chaplaincy. I am a board certified chaplain and am a member of the Pediatric Chaplains Network, as well as the Association of Professional Chaplains. So we're going to talk about spirituality and spiritual care in pediatrics, and a roadmap of where we're going is here. We're going to look at what spirituality is in general and specifically in children, what spiritual care looks like in healthcare and in pediatric healthcare. And I'll end with a summary and reveal my sources and leave room for questions and discussion. So what is spirituality? Dr. Christina Puchalski and others gathered in 2013 or so and published in the Journal of Palliative Medicine. They were working on a consensus, national and international consensus of what spirituality is and how to provide this whole person care, the spiritual dimension of it in particular. And their definition, I find, is pretty strong. Spirituality is a dynamic and intrinsic aspect of humanity through which persons seek ultimate meaning and purpose and transcendence and experience relationship to self, family, others, community, society, nature, and the significant or sacred. Spirituality is expressed through beliefs, values, traditions, and practices. I find this definition, I have to, change some of the words so that kids understand, to be useful when I walk in a room and I tell them I'm a chaplain. First of all, they don't know what a chaplain is, but they always assume religion. And I tell them that no, spirituality is a thing that religion can feed, but it is not about religion. Children's spirituality, in Rebecca Nye's book in 2009, she defines it, and the emphases are hers. Children's spirituality is an initially natural capacity for awareness of the sacred quality to life experiences. This awareness can be conscious or unconscious, and it sometimes fluctuates between both, but in both cases can affect actions, feelings, and thoughts. In childhood, spirituality is especially about being attracted toward being in relation, responding to a call to relate to more than just me, that is, to others, to God, to creation, or to a deeper sense of self. This encounter with transcendence can happen in specific experiences or moments, as well as through imaginative or reflective activity, thoughts, and meaning making. Carl Jung, in The Development of Personality in 1954, wrote, "In every adult there lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming, is never completed, and calls for unceasing care, attention, and education." That is the part of the personality which wants to develop and become whole. Although I'm presenting children's spirituality as a separate entity from adult spirituality, please know that it is not. In the Christian faith in particular, we are told that becoming like a child is a key task for adult spiritual maturity. When reading the Carl Jung quote and in looking at children's spirituality, I'm often reminded of 1 Corinthians 13, verses 11 through 12. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now, we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And I think Joni Mitchell's reflection on that passage in her song Love from the album Wild Things Run Fast in 1982 even clarifies this further for me. She says, love sees like a child sees. As a child, I spoke as a child. I thought and I understood as a child. But when I became a woman, I put away childish things and began to see through a glass darkly. Whereas a child, I saw it face to face. Now I only know it in part. So something happens as we age into adulthood, and we sort of lose touch with the wonder of being a child and the ability to perceive things that are spiritual in nature and that we intuitively knew as children and do not always recognize as adults. Key themes from Rebecca Nye's book include the following. Children's spirituality is more natural than it is something taught. It is fertile ground for spirituality, likely more so than adulthood. The spirituality of childhood is carried over into adulthood, and spirituality is profoundly and deeply relational. I'm going to take a brief look here at James Fowler's theory of stages of faith development, which can be thought of as spiritual development as well. They map roughly onto Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive development, Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, and Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development. He was a professor of theology and human development at Emory University. And in 1995, he published his developmental model based on faith, stages of faith, the psychology of human development, and the quest for meaning. He proposes 7 primary stages of faith, including stage 0 in the life of the individual. And the first stage 0 is primal undifferentiated faith. Infants experience awe, sometimes in the form of great fear. They are in the process of developing trust and mistrust. Learning through their bodily experiences whether the world is a safe, comforting place for them or not. They need consistent, loving, secure care to enhance their later in life experiences of harmony with others and with the divine. Conversely, abandonment, inconsistency, and insecurity will cause mistrust, and fear that may lead to existential angst as they develop. Stage 1, 3 to 7 years old, is intuitive, projective faith. Toddlers are endlessly curious and begin to model adults. They develop a concept of ego self with more distinct personalities. Preschoolers develop foundations of a worldview through exploration, wonder, and imagination. They are keen observers, but poor interpreters. Faith during this stage is experiential. It's developing through stories and images, the influence of those around them, and a deepening intuitive sense of what is right and wrong. Their understanding of their place in the universe and of the transcendent is likely to lack consistent logic. In stage 2, the mythic literal faith stage, ages 7 to 12, about. As the child begins to develop logical thinking ability, their beliefs or worldview may concretize. They may understand religious metaphors, taking them literally, and feel disappointed in God or the universe when their concept of a transactional relationship and a concrete transactional relationship, if I do good, I'll get good, if that does not produce the desired outcomes. Stage 3, synthetic conventional faith, ages 12 to early adulthood. Here, a child may develop an identification with a particular belief system and will experience growth of a personal spiritual identity, whether it's religious or not. They are likely to be threatened by challenges to their beliefs and choose to ignore them. They are able to think more abstractly about the divine, or they're beginning to. And then stage 4, about 18 to 22 years old is when it begins. And this stage, some people never leave it throughout their adulthood. The individual takes personal responsibility for their beliefs. And these may increase in complexity and nuance. Conflicting beliefs may cause struggle, angst, but the individual has a greater sense of open-mindedness as they reflect on their spirituality. So what does spiritual care look like? Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, affectionately called JCAHO, is a nonprofit accrediting and certifying body for healthcare organizations and programs in the US. Their standards of spiritual care are that each patient's spirituality should be assessed, accommodated, and attended to in ways that are important to them. Bare minimum assessments should include the patient's denomination, faith, or religion, their beliefs, and faith practices that are important to them. So the role of the chaplain in this, as spiritual care providers, we are vital participants in the patient's interdisciplinary medical team. We help assess patients' and families' values and support their medical decision-making based on those values. Additionally, in pediatrics, I think more than in adult healthcare, I'm often providing spiritual care for the whole family system as it presents itself while the child is hospitalized. In hospital chaplaincy, every chaplain is responsible for providing more than the bare minimum spiritual assessment described by JCAHO. Our role is to listen to and assess patients and family members' fears, their griefs and feelings of guilt or powerlessness. We are also tasked with identifying patients and family members' strengths, asking questions such as, how does your faith support you in times like these? To what do you turn when you feel utterly powerless? What gives you a sense of purpose or peace? What are you hoping for today? And tell me 3 things that bring you joy. Additionally, JCAHO recommends assessing the following. Who or what provides the patient with a strength and hope? Does the patient use prayer? How does the patient express their spirituality? How would the patient describe their philosophy of life? What type of spiritual or religious support does the patient desire? What is the name of their clergy, their minister, pastor, priest, imam, or rabbi? What does suffering mean to the patient? What does dying mean to the patient? What are the patient's spiritual goals? Is there a role of church, synagogue, mosque, temple in their life? How does the patient keep going day after day? What helps the patient get through this healthcare experience? And how has illness affected the patient and their family? Spiritual care in pediatrics. With infants and preschoolers, remembering James Fowler's stages of faith, we assess the family's values and the spiritual needs. Most of these children are nonverbal. We normalize their experience, the family's experience, as well as the child's. Reinforce the patient's work of trust building, model compassion, and be fully present, and listen carefully to stories that preschoolers tell. In school age, 5 to 12-year-old abouts, I speak to the child, not about them. When I was in Wilson Hospital, I remember people talking over me to my parents about me. And it just added to the feelings of helplessness and powerlessness that I had while I was there. Respect the autonomy, their agency. Ask them if it's okay if I sit with you for a bit. Play is their work. Consider it a sacrament. Ask them what they believe. Don't hesitate to do that. With adolescents, I validate the patient's search for meaning, empower them to find and use their own voice, respect their struggles and ideas, and I encourage healthy relationships. I often hear stories about friendships that are not for the patient's best interest, and I explore that with them, why they're attached to some people that may not be the best support. I share information with parents or guardians only with patients' permission. In spiritual conversations with children, I change my orientation to that of a learner. I let them lead and I go where they lead. I explore alongside them. I bring my curiosity, my wonder without giving answers. I embrace the chaos. Sometimes it's Legos all over the floor. Children often communicate through play. I join them and I affirm their agency. Again, who's here with you today? In basic techniques, I normalize their experience, whether it's cancer, a heart condition, having been hit by a car, respiratory illness. I approach the child first, resist gravitating to the adults in the room. I respect psychological distance. I don't get too close right off, and I ask if it's okay if I sit with them. Understand that you may not make a connection on the first encounter. Establishing rapport takes time. Join with whatever they're doing. A movie, TV, video game, some toy. Ask if you can play too. Remember, play is the work of children. Again, this is important. Consider it a sacrament. Children communicate through play, and joining them shows you respect that, and that their voice matters, that their stories matter to you. Do be on their level as much as possible and try not to change your voice. They'll know you're faking. They tend to see right through us. Don't force prayer if the child declines, even if the adult in the room insists. And this one is hard because I always make a mom unhappy. But if a child does not want prayer, I will not do it. I ask them about what they believe. I get their permission before sharing their confidences. And I tell them I chart my encounters with them so that they'll know that there's a record of my presence in their room. At the Pediatric Chaplains Network Conference in 2024, Amanda Kiborchik and Kate Ballou Desjardins, both of whom work for Transforming Chaplaincy, by the way, they presented a working definition of pediatric spiritual assessment. Pediatric spiritual assessment is a theory-informed interpretive framework. It always centers the child, including their family, caregivers when appropriate, in a co-created container based in safety, connection, and mutual trust. The environment of this container honors the developmental and cultural context of the child and family, their values, and values all forms of expression, and is most effectively fostered by play. Assessment is based in observation, naming child and family assets first, while also holding space to explore the impacts of unfair suffering. A core task of assessment is communicating patient-valued outcomes to the interdisciplinary team in a language register that both resonates with the medical model's hope to provide whole-person care and illuminates the unique spirituality of the child and family. That co-created container is a safe space. It's a compassionate space. Remembering that in pediatrics, I think more than in adult health care, I am providing spiritual care for the whole family. I intentionally model compassion and consistency. The child will be discharged into their family, whatever that looks like. And fostering the child's sense of security and feeling consistently cared for while they are in the hospital may strengthen their spiritual health and that of their family going forward. In summary, in providing spiritual care to children and adolescents, we need to be open to learning from them. They don't need to be taught about spirituality. They are already spiritual beings. We need to meet a patient no matter their age, where they are, not where we want them to be. We need to discover alongside them what spirituality is for them. And then I'll end with a quote, and I know I've not given you a whole hour. I'll end with a quote from Henry Nouwen. Gentle is the one who is attentive to the strengths and weaknesses of the other and enjoys being together more than accomplishing something. A gentle person treads lightly, listens carefully, looks tenderly, and touches with reverence. A gentle person knows that true growth requires nurture and not force. And these are some of my sources. And I thank you for your time, and I will look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Patty. Do folks have thoughts, questions, insights?
Can that be sent to us, that PDF?
Yeah, I can make a PDF of that and send it to Mary Ann
Uh-huh.
or Erin.
Okay, and they can get it out to us.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Patty, I have a question for you.
Okay.
You talked about the importance of talking to the child and not over them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the parents are going to still try to answer for the child.
Yeah.
Any tips on how to redirect away from the parent to allow the child to answer for themselves?
Sorry, I'm distracting myself. Yeah, I will sometimes, just turn to, if I've gotten an answer from a child about how they're, the parent about how the child is feeling, I will turn to the child and say, is that true? How are you feeling? What do you think about that? And parents will persist, guardians will persist in talking over them, about them. I remember that child that I was when that happened to me, and I consistently turn to the child to give them a chance to use their own voice. And yeah, sometimes it's a losing game, and sometimes the parents shut up and let the child express themselves, which is awesome.
Yeah, I was thinking along those same lines, because I've had children tell me about spiritual experiences they've had or have spiritual beliefs. Like one young man who was 6 or 7 said, I have a brother, and his grandmother said, of course you do. His name is so-and-so. And the child goes, oh yeah, but I have another brother and he lives in heaven. And the grandma was like, what? And he goes, his name is Jesus. And she was like, no, you don't. And I thought, and she's sitting right there and she's looking at me like, teach him the right thing. And I'm
Right.
what's wrong with that? Like,
Nothing.
tell me about, it's so you can get in those situations where you're kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
the parent has an expectation that you do one thing and you're trying to do your job. Like, can you talk about that tension a little bit?
If I had been in that room, I would have said to the child, tell me about your brother Jesus. After grandma said, you don't have one. Why, well, how is he your brother? And invite that exploration. And it's, again, inviting storytelling, inviting play. And that's, wow. Yeah, I can just imagine how rich a conversation with that child would have been if I had asked that. And yeah, grandma might continue to, but she also might realize something deeper is happening and experience that along with me, if that makes sense. And I've seen that happen where, oh, I could have asked that question, and I would have learned this about him and his beliefs. Parents are, particularly in a public place like a hospital, parents are quick and grandparents are quick to present, right? This is my version of this child, but they don't say it like that. They say, this is this child. And so they will correct misstatements like that as if they are wrong. And they're not. They're part of the child's story.
Thanks.
I had an interesting encounter with a child, which is my grandchild, just these past couple of days. So I talked to him a lot, about their spirituality, and of course, but she shared something with me. Her name is Justice. And to keep from me being biased, she said, I asked God that I wanted to see a pink Tesla. And I said, And she said, one pulled up shortly after, her prayer of that. And I was like, wow. And it just touched me that she was testing her spirituality with God and finding out and asking him a prayer to see who he was. So that's how I interpreted it. And I shared that with her.
Yeah. So
So
how old is she?
I believe Justice is 11. Yeah,
Okay.
10 or 11.
So that sounds like that transactional relationship with God. Like, if I ask for this, I'll get it.
Okay.
And I mean, we can point to biblical stories of Gideon, right? Putting out the fleece, and everything was wet except the fleece, and then, yeah, and vice versa. And he's told, and others in the Bible are told, not to test God. And I'm not saying tell your grandchild not to test God. I'm saying, wow, that's really interesting that you have that relationship with God. And I wonder, and wonder is a huge word in pediatric chaplaincy. Wonder everything. I'm curious. I wonder, because they're curious, they're wondering. I wonder how you would have felt if it didn't show up.
Okay.
And what would you think of God if it didn't show up? And
Wow.
to make a secure and compassionate space for that conversation. And it might just be, they don't believe in God if it doesn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one moment in the child's life, right? And the child is curious about God and is going to continue testing. What
Is it a trying of the faith too? The
is it?
try me and see, trying of her faith, like try me and see if I'm real.
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. Does God see me? Does God
Yeah.
hear me? Um, yeah.
Okay.
But protect it, like, yes, and the
Okay.
the other thing we're always doing is, yeah, and I wonder this, and I wonder that, but be open to whatever comes out of their mouth because they're exploring. That's how they learn.
Okay. Yeah, because I was amazed that she shared that with me.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, ooh,
And you want her to continue sharing things like that with you.
okay. And I wanted to give her the right feedback. That's what I was nervous about, not to,
Just
put
be,
my input or anything just
yeah.
to find out. Yeah.
So
Um,
that, how did it make you feel when that pink Tesla showed up? Did it,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, wonder,
Yeah.
wonder.
Investigate that. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but gently, with
Okay.
compassion, um, with that safe container. This is a space in which you are safe to tell me whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was excited that she shared that with me.
It's
Thankful.
beautiful.
Like, wow. Yeah.
Thank you, Latasha.
Thank you. Mhm.
Patty, my context don't have as many pediatric patients, like when they come here first and then they will be here for a little bit, if they be here to Syracuse. But I have noticed an uptick of two types of patients that are younger, some of our adolescent patients who experienced trauma. recently I had a patient who was in a, he was shot, and they've recently created a trauma team to work with patients in that situation. And the social worker sort of stumbled upon a spiritual care department, I would say, because the patient, he had asked for a Quran because he's Muslim. And I just found this was very helpful for me because he was like in that 18 to 22-year-old age. And one of the questions I remember him asking me was, I did everything right. I'm a young African American man, and I didn't do the things that they told me not to do. I kept my head clean, and this still happened to me. I still got shot. And so we explored that, but I'm just wondering, like, if you had been in that space, like, how would you have responded to him, and how would you have held space? Like, he's kind of stuck with me a little bit, like, and it's made me think, like, because there's going to be other.
There will be, yeah. Wow. Again, wonder. Just explore what that means for him. Tell me more, tell me more.
Mm.
And affirm again, that safe space to do that exploration. You're not an imam, you're not his parents pushing Islam on him, if that's even happening. You're not questioning a religion. You're getting at the root of what his spiritual problem is right now, and acknowledging that being a young African American male in our country is a dangerous thing, and that's awful. It should not be dangerous to just be, right? Whoever you are. So you're in some ways you're joining him in the grief and pain of recognizing his vulnerability in his body, and also exploring what his faith might tell him about who he is. I'm often telling, like, there's quite a number of transgender children in our behavioral health unit, and some of them are coming from fairly restrictive evangelical whatever traditions, and they're feeling unloved. And I often remind them, well, what did you learn about God? God is love, right? And that you are loved. We're all loved. That without God there is no love. So that they have room in their faith for themselves, because they believe it and they feel like they're unable to be in it. So if the Quran tells him that he is beloved by God, he's beloved by God, and it's okay to affirm that.
Well, how would we, piggybacking off of Rachel, not explain, but spiritually care for what he thought that he didn't do anything wrong, and then when you're doing all you know how to do right, but you still wind up a victim or hurt, or in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
'Cause I had those questions myself sometimes. Well, why is this happening to me? I'm doing everything,
I'm
Lord.
doing everything right.
Why did you allow this to happen to me?
I remember being in a series of really bad accidents in one car trip when I was in my mid-20s, and thinking, I have done everything I'm supposed to do, and this is happening. And it was Christmas, and it was, sorry, Canada, uh, in which these occurred, and somebody broke into our car and stole a whole bunch of stuff in Canada. And for me, that was a crisis of faith, right? The I'm doing all the right things, and yet this is happening to me. And I think knowing that from my own past, I can say to somebody of that age, this happens. This is part of life. It isn't fair. And what's happening to you sucks. It's awful. Affirming that, and affirming that it can cause him to question his faith. But then also talking about or listening to him as he tries to balance it, as he tries to recognize that there are more nuances and complexities to his faith than he's been giving himself credit for, if that makes sense. That's part of I didn't talk about the two adult stages of faith that Fowler proposes. I did say that at stage 4, people often, it's not getting stuck, there's no right or wrong, but they often live their lives. Everything good happens to them because they're good, and they go through their lives like that, right? But there are 2 other stages, and the final one, which is his stage 6, is universalizing this openness to the divine, no matter how it presents itself, and understanding that, yeah, we all suffer. And it sounds very Buddhist, but it can be of any faith. So when I'm working with young adults, late adolescents who are going through situations like that, I'm not pushing them in that direction, but I'm sort of blowing on the flame a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And nurturing the sparks of a it really is a more mature spirituality, right?
And it could be more of a trying of our faith just to push in this area,
Mhm.
and that everything, just because we're Christian, spiritual, whatever, we don't, it's not always easy or want to say better roses in our
Yeah.
faith. Things happen in our,
Yep.
spirituality, our faith, and we just have to keep persevering through it. And, I find the Lord will give us the answers, or we will find the answers in that, and keeping your faith and not, I don't know, I want to explain that more because he's an adolescent, but
Right.
I'm getting that they paint the picture that we'll never go anything. Well, sometimes the picture is painted
Yeah.
that we won't go through obstacles in our faith or our spirituality, which is untrue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often, and this happens in the adult world in the hospital more than in pediatrics, but I often hear from patients and family members that it's not fair. What's happening to me isn't fair. Or God is punishing me for something. And I say, it isn't fair, but no one said life was fair. Nowhere is that written, as far as I know. And what does that unfairness mean for you right now in the space you're in?
Okay.
How is that making you feel? Is it disrupting? And I wouldn't ask it this way, but disrupting your relationships with your family, with God.
Yeah. Because I resonate what you said about these things happen,
Mhm.
even to the best of us. But yeah.
And sometimes they happen to some people more than they happen to others. And it's just, how fortunate are we to be living in this country? And yet, even in this country, we have such inequity, right? We have
Mhm.
people who are suffering more than others.
We all have a perseverance or some kind of stamina to go through it and come out on the other side every time, you
Right.
know.
Another thing families will say is, God promised he wouldn't give me more than I can handle. I hate that.
Right. But
Um,
that's true. Yeah. Okay.
but what it actually says is alone. God won't give you, you know, you're not alone. You're in community. You are held by the divine. And yes, things are going to happen and you're not going to be able to handle them. Guess what? There are other people.
That can help.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's community, there's God, there's turning to that, even in the darkest. And again, my God, why have you forsaken me? Is Psalm 22, Psalm 23.
Right. And he wasn't really forsaken. And then he gave his strongest battles to what? What that saying was the soldiers, the
Oh yeah,
strongest soldiers or the boldest soldiers. I'll be out there. He gave his strongest battles to what?
yeah. No,
Yeah.
Some
to
individuals.
and
I was just gonna say, Latasha, that a lot of people, I've had experience with people reacting really negatively to that. Like, I
yeah,
remember somebody who, this was a couple in the church I was serving. They had a child born with Down syndrome and a lot of physical needs. And people would say, oh, it's so great that this happened to you because we think you could handle it. And that family started to take that as an insult,
yeah,
right? Like that whole like strongest challenges happen to the strongest soldiers. Like, why are we so strong? Why are we? So that's not always received well.
no.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I have fear and trembling is when I hear the patient or the family themselves say that
Oh,
I must be more faithful because God is giving me more struggles.
yeah.
And
Okay.
again, just
Yeah.
wonder, explore what that means to them, how that faith can sustain them going forward.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I got it.
Patty, do you ever have situations where there are, like, I can remember when I was in the NICU, one of the things that happened was there was a grandmother who wanted one thing, a parent wanted another thing, and it was an infant. So the infant didn't have any say. And dealing with that intergenerational
Yeah.
kind of conflict, have you encountered anything like that?
Oh yeah. A grandparent wants a baptism. The parents are like, no way.
Right.
Parents rule in that case, unless grandmother has custody. Parents, they win. They are the guardians of the potential autonomy of the child, right? Sorry, that was my bioethics training. So I turned to them and I apologized to grandmother, but I cannot do this because the parents do not want this to happen. She can, baptize him when she's alone in the room, but she shouldn't be alone in the room.
I had a grandmother that did that.
Yeah, I bet you did. I know what happened.
She was like, don't worry, I baptized them last night.
I was tempted.
I said, oh my God. Well, you wouldn't do it. So I did it and now it's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. And so what is that going to do to
Right.
your family going forward? And I would talk to grandma about that even before she sneakily baptized him. But yesterday I was called to a family's room, and the parents were there and the grandmother was there, and it turns out the grandmother is the one who wanted a chaplain, and what she really wanted was a Roman Catholic priest to come, and right now we don't have one that we can beg to do something trivial. It's not trivial. I said, well, I know how to pray. I can pray. And then I said to the parents, and I was using ASL interpreters, are you okay if I pray? And they were like, sure. And I prayed, and grandma was happy, blessed the child herself. And then I turned to the mom and the dad, how are you doing? How are you coping with this? Clearly grandma's got it covered with God, with the church. That's her shield. They were raw and vulnerable and needed to talk. So I checked to make sure that prayer was okay for them, because grandma was being very directive, and they were like, yeah, whatever. And then checked in on how they were coping, because my role as a chaplain, I believe, is not just spiritual support, but emotional support, like holding space for the emotions that people are feeling. And there's spirituality in them. So that's part of the job.
I like the way that you paid attention to both. You didn't discredit one for the other or put one above the other, except the line that parents have
Yeah.
say. And we're able to navigate that, because I think sometimes those are the hardest things when you have differences like that in the room.
Yeah. So this was a 2-month-old, so she was nonverbal, and was sort of sleepy and in and out of it. So I wasn't, asking her. But when I had a cancer patient who was 9 and was a real pill, and his mother insisted I pray, and I said to him, "Is that something you want?" He was like, "No." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to do it then." And she said, "No, you have to." That was harder for me, because it's like, sorry, Mom, I'm not gonna. I'm going to respect the agency of your child. And if he wants prayer later, I can come back. And I'm happy to pray with you, but we're going to do it outside the room.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's hard. I'm a bit of a people pleaser, and that one is really hard.
Do you have any things that you kind of carry with you? Because play is such an important part of a child's world. You just go yourself, or do you have a bag of tricks? Like,
I have no tricks. So when I go to behavioral health for spirituality groups, I have a game and some worksheets to fill out afterwards. So there's gratitude bingo, and then like a gratitude journal that I will use with them. They love bingo. They're not so much into the journaling, but I've got a captive audience at that point. So that's what we do.
yeah,
And it's gratitude as a spiritual practice. And a healthy practice, also psychologically helpful. But with children in the hospital, I couldn't carry everything. I'd need like Santa and reindeer to carry everything that I might meet, right? I'd rather go in and see what they're already doing, what they're already engaged in. There's a child in the PICU who's been here for a bit, who I think she's 3 or 4, I can't remember, but when I walk in the room, she points to the bottle of bubbles on the counter and wants me to blow bubbles while she pops them. She got a trach a couple weeks ago, and now she can blow bubbles with her trach, and it's so much fun to see her delight in that. And yeah, so I meet what's in the room. If they're watching a movie, Disney is huge. I'll talk. Oh, tell me about this part if they want to talk. Or, oh, I love this movie. What's your favorite part? Things like that. And I am not as well versed in Disney movies as I probably should be as a pediatric chaplain, but
there's always new ones.
there is, and I don't subscribe to the Disney Channel. I'll put it that way.
More opportunities for them to teach you, right?
Exactly. What is this game? What is this? There was a kid who had a brain injury who's you know, tossing around a soft football. There's another kid who's been here for a while. He's 17. He has a Nerf gun, and he lies in his bed and shoots people in the hallway and pretending you're dying. Just, you know, stuff like that. Join them where they are.
You were saying that we sometimes have we have a behavioral health contingency at EGH. We don't, again, like when kids come here, they start here and then they go usually up to Rochester. I was just thinking about one of my patients. He sort of stumbled into his room. He was 8 years old and he had a coloring book, and we just talked about coloring, which I love coloring, so it was great. But he didn't have very much else in the room because they don't allow them very much in the room. But like he talked about that, and then he talked about his favorite team, which was local. And I think the thing that surprised me is that I don't know that he had been asked any of those questions to stay.
Yeah.
And I wonder how do you give autonomy how do you give space for that when everybody else who's caring is just more concerned about hurt somebody, or are they going to do something like, and forget that they turn and have autonomy too.
Yeah. For their safety, they're here rather than out in the community, or they're part of a partial program if they're safe enough to do that. I'm not allowed to take currently on the unit behavioral health. I'm not allowed to take books that are stapled. So my gratitude journal is like 2 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper and folded in half. And every time, why isn't this stapled? And I say, I don't have a stapler that can reach all the way to the middle. That's part of it. But also I cannot have staples on this unit. And which is on some level kind of ridiculous. How much harm can you do with a staple? But you can do enough. And there's a history of cutting with several patients. And yeah, so anyway, I tell them I just want them to be safe and to have tools when they go home that will help them feel secure spiritually, because that's my job. Things that they can turn to when the voices or whatever become too much. I will tell you that most of the work I've done or did before taking this job was working with eating disordered patients. And I find them harder than anything else because their brains are not nourished enough to think outside the eating disorder box, if you will. You know, they're stuck, and I have trouble working with them. But even there, you know, what are you hoping for? Can you do that on the trajectory you're on now? And yeah, what does your future look like? Many of them don't think they have one, which is awful. And that's a dark place to be, which is, anyway, I try and be there with them as much as I can. And I do have to make, I do have to, you know, what's it called? Differentiate between myself and them. I can't take on their mental illness, but I can be in the space with them and then walk away. You asked Marianne about tools, and I was thinking, oh, she's asking me about what I do to let go. No, I have origami paper, and I get really nice origami paper, and I fold paper cranes when I have I need to like decompress. And if a patient has clung to me in a way, I will write their initials on a paper crane and I'll hang it in my office. I also, when I was an intern, developed a practice of walking out of the building recognizing that there are two sets of doors, and it's like a butterfly exhibit where there are two sets of doors, right? And you go through the first set and you make sure nothing's clinging to you. There are mirrors at a butterfly exhibit. Make sure there's nothing clinging to you, and then you go through the next set of doors. And that has been a practice I've just kept. Like, what's clinging to me? What am I taking home? Can I brush it off? And sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't. But to acknowledge that I'm not able to brush it off is part of my keeping healthy.
That's great. Patti, I noticed that we're at our time limit.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your work and your wisdom with us in working with children in a healthcare setting. Our next Lunch and Learn is on July 17th. And Zainab Mancini, who is a Muslim chaplain, is going to be talking with us about Muslim spirituality. So that'll be at 11 o'clock on July 17th. Patti, thanks. And
Thank you.
everyone, thanks for being here, and I hope we see you again.
Thank you for having me.